The following audio discussion is from episode 10 of Astound's podcast series, AI and the Future of Work. Host Dan Turchin, co-founder and chief product officer of Astound, welcomes special guest Julie Mohr, international artificial intelligence expert, speaker, and author, to discuss what leaders need to do now to be relevant in the decade ahead, and how to use AI-driven automation to balance investment in people, process, and technology.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you're listening from. This is Dan Turchin, co-founder of Astound and host of AI and the Future of Work. Thank you for joining us for another exciting episode. I couldn't be more excited than to get a chance to speak with our special guest today, who I've been waiting to speak with on this podcast for quite some time. Julie Mohr needs no introduction. Internationally acclaimed speaker, presenter, probably a top 5 influencer in the IT service management community. You've probably seen her or read her work at some point. She's contributed a lot of content specifically related to artificial intelligence, to Axelos, which maintains a lot of the ITIL content. Really looking forward to this conversation. Julie, welcome to the show. Why don't you go ahead and share any bits of your background that I didn't cover there?
Thanks, Dan, for having me here today. You know, I started out in IT many decades ago, formally trained computer scientists, and I kind of got the bug in artificial intelligence and knowledge management starting way back when I was at college at Ohio State. And
Go Buckeyes.
Yeah, go Buckeyes. It's one of those things that, there's certain things in your career that for some reason you identify with, and those were the topics. Of course, they're very different today than they were back then, but it didn't matter what job I was in, whether it was a consultant or a practitioner, whether it was help desk, service management. That was always kind of this like beating focus for me, for my writing, for my speaking, for my intellectual property development. So I am absolutely honored to be here with you today to just kind of kick it around and talk between you and I about these topics.
I love it. In prepping for this podcast, one of the things I loved about our conversation is how you kind of mapped, some of these concepts, across the arc of your career, and how kind of you said, this is a wave that you've seen coming for a while, and now you're excited to be a part of it. Talk to us about what you think has led us in IT service management to the point where we're ready for kind of AI-driven automation.
2 things. And I don't know which one to put first because to me, they're equally important. I could list a plethora of things right? The technology is ready. The cost of data is so down, we've got all these data sources, but I think the 2 things that I would say have put us where we are here today is knowledge and our customers. We see all these companies that lead and innovate, and our customers are hungry for it. There's this constant need to stop thinking about the underlying technology and think about what you actually want to accomplish. And as that has become easier and easier for our consumers, they're just hungry for more. How many of us have devices in our home for automating things? How many of us have connected devices like refrigerators or other things where you could check how many eggs you have while you're at the store? These modern conveniences are, if there wasn't a palate from our customers for more, it wouldn't have driven this incredibly rapid pace of innovation. Those companies that innovate are making so much money and reinvesting, and those companies that aren't are very quickly being left behind. So I think it is primarily driven through the dollar, the consumers buying, spending, and wanting more. But I also think that probably about a decade, maybe more like decade and a half or 2 decades ago, there were some very intelligent companies that said, you know what, we're not going to think about profits. We're not going to think about our products and services. The first and most important thing we're going to do is start capturing information. And from that information, we can drive innovation. We'll be smarter. We'll know exactly what our customers want. We won't be hesitating or guessing or trying to stay ahead of the competition. We will be at that innovative forefront because it'll be customer driven. So by creating this massive amount of information about our customers, we were able to then, create better products and services, number one, innovate in ways that our customers really were wanting and demanding. And so I really think that the combination of knowledge and the power of the dollar with the consumer is really what has driven this rapid pace in the last 5 years. I mean, as I said, you could throw in a variety of other factors like amazing technology and innovative business models and all kinds of other things. I mean, those things are always going to be a part of advancing society, great ideas, creative thinking. But I really think the knowledge economy and the customer economy have really driven this just rapid pace of change.
Well said. So you go all over the world, you talk to different audiences, and I know that as a community, there's always a discussion about how we balance the needs of people, process, and technology in support of delivering great service. How do you reconcile the three, and maybe foreshadowing what's up ahead? How do you think that conversation will change?
It's hard as an IT service management professional to say, we've gone a long way with service management, and it's taken us to this point where we have kind of taken the magnifying glass and placed it on ourselves and said, how can we get better? But it's only taken us so far. So this focus on people and process and tools was incredibly important for maturing our industry. You think of some of these other industries, they've been around for, the accounting industry, right? The standard accounting practices have been around forever. It's an established way to do something. We don't have that in IT. So service management brought that. Let's look at this from a professional standpoint. Let's stop building things in the garage and experimenting on our customers. Let's put more rigor around it. But by the time we started putting that rigor in place, our customers were demanding a pace of change and a reinvention of technology that was keeping up in the industry. And our internal IT departments were then seen as very slow, very process-oriented, not able to be agile and change fast enough for the business. So this balance of people, process, and tools is incredibly important. And that internal focus is always going to be, how can we do things better, faster, cheaper? But we can't do that and lose sight of needing to change and innovate to serve the business's needs. I mean, the pace of innovation today is so rapid. And I hear it all the time when I go to conferences. People are complaining, we've got all these projects and they've got more projects and they're always asking us to do more with less. And yet we have stuck with the same business model, right? We don't innovate or change or think about, okay, we're passionate about our people. How can we do this without losing people? Well, hello, you want to become more agile. Sometimes you're going to have to let people go and invest in technologies and make smart decisions for the longevity of the business, not just for this equal balance of people, process, tools. Now, there's no doubt that we can never lose focus. Our people are definitely important. We need the right ones with the right skills, but that skill set is so dramatically changing. And, we are challenged with keeping those skill sets where they need to be to support that pace of innovation. I mean, that's an investment in our people. That doesn't necessarily mean keeping the same ones we have, but finding the right ones if we can't train our existing staff to do what we need to do. So I don't think, the balance of people, process, and tools will ever not be an important part of delivering a great service. But we've got to get better at creating services that are meaningful to our customers and not slowing that process down. We have to have more agile models that don't put resistance. I mean, I'll give you a great example. I went to a conference I was speaking at in New York. And I was a little nervous before I got on stage. New York City, I'm downtown. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. It's a big city. I'm all excited. So I step into this one room just to sit down for like 5 minutes, just to anchor myself in something. And no kidding, I get in there, I sit down. This guy says, well, I'm going to apologize right now if there's anybody from IT in here. He goes, we didn't go to IT. We went ahead and made the decision and procured it. It was in the cloud, so it stayed on their infrastructure. We bought the product, implemented it, and we couldn't be happier at what it's driving for us. To be honest, IT's too slow and their processes are too controlled for us to get this in the time that we needed it. And I thought, how poignant was that to step in when that guy was saying IT is too slow. And, when I look at healthcare organizations struggling to keep up with all these massive amounts of applications and infrastructure, and yet with the power of my phone, I can interact with my doctor, send images, make appointments. The business side is somehow figuring out how to innovate, but the internal IT department is too slow to manage the volume of change. That's a dynamic that we have to figure out. We have to come up with new business models. And this is why artificial intelligence and knowledge management are these critical predecessors, right? If we can figure these things out and use them effectively in IT, we'll then be able to provide that greater support for what our end users, our consumers are demanding.
So you said something earlier that's interesting about kind of accounting and other kind of disciplines have these frameworks. And, in some ways, the IT needs its own framework as well. And I know you've done a lot of work on ITIL content, concepts, training, et cetera. That kind of polarizes our community. Some feel like, ITIL is kind of obsolete, and others feel like it's a nice kind of healthy framework. Is ITIL or COBIT, Central, are those frameworks still relevant in an era of automation?
I think I have to back up and first say that any framework is always relevant. Every single one of these industries, doesn't matter how long they've been around, there's a certain set of common practices that are required, and understanding those is one thing. Applying them the most effective way that your organization should be applying them to meet your customer needs is a completely different thing. And I think that's what we're seeing with the evolution now into ITIL version 4, is that there was such a process-oriented focus in ITIL version 3. Do this process, right? Do this process. In the hands of a practitioner, it looked like advice that said, you'll be doing service management if you implement incident management and problem management and change management. When in reality, you could have just had a transition department that could have handled change, release, all of those things, as long as they were getting the work done and it was focused on the business and creating value for the business. And so a linear process was very myopic in its view. And ITIL was never intended to be giving prescriptive advice that this is a process and the way it should be done. It was meant to share, these are the best practices that we've seen in the industry. We want to tell you about them so that you can leverage these as appropriate. So we've had this complete change and not a reinvention, but a really a dynamic focused change where we've said, okay, look, we're not saying processes are not important, but there's a way to do this that makes sense. And then there's the way that everybody's been doing it, which tends to be a lot of wasted time and effort and a lot of money spent on training and all these things where they didn't get the value that they were expecting. And so organizations that went through that are like sick of ITIL. They're like, yeah, we did that. We tried that. It didn't work. And the reality is these are practices that do work. It's really, how do you put them in place in a way that's going to help your organization be successful? There is no one company that had everything ITIL from page 1 in service strategy to the last page in CSI. It would be too expensive. It doesn't make sense. But then again, there wasn't a lot of practical advice on, okay, so how do you see this working? And that's where the practices in the newer version come into play. They're basically saying, look, this is part of continuous improvement. Start where you are. Don't think you got to start from zero. You look at where you are, you assess where you are today, and make incremental changes. You don't start implementing all of the service operation processes and then a year later expect for it to have reinvented your environment. I mean, it's like using the set of books in a way that it was never intended for it to be used. So this new rewrite is really around focusing on, the value chain. And how this is a complex thing. I mean, it's not just technology, it is people and process and focusing on customer experience and all the different touch points. There is nothing about this that's easy. But at the same time, we don't need to make it more difficult by applying a framework. The framework should help to alleviate some of that difficulty for us. It should eliminate friction and clean up inefficiencies in the environment so that we can get faster speed to a more quality product. So it's not the frameworks that's the problem. It's the way that people have been using the frameworks as if it was a defense, an armor that they wore against the business. Well, we're doing ITIL and that's going to make us a best practice environment when it didn't produce the results that we really needed. So, I get why people are tired of it. It's like anything, you get hit over the head enough with it, and then you start to, the shine and the glamour wears off. But the underlying core principles of start from where you are, incremental improvements, make adjustments as you need. These are common practices that have existed in every vertical market. It's not just an IT thing. It's let's be smart about change. Let's not go out and try to do something broad and sweeping, that we're going to start down a path and end up somewhere where we really didn't intend. So there's a lot to be learned from that mistake, and I'm hoping that our industry can correct from that and recognize that this is another tool in a tool belt, but it doesn't take away the responsibility to use those things correctly.
So you talked about how the framework is really intended to provide coaching on best practices. Fast forward to ITIL 5, 6, kind of what's up ahead. And, again, having authored some of the content, where do you feel AI-driven automation will kind of seep its way into some of the best practices that will be written into future versions of the ITIL spec?
So you and I have had some conversations around this, and so I know we're kind of similar thinking related to this. But when Axelos approached me about writing a paper around artificial intelligence and IT service management, I speak at these conferences and I pay attention to what's going on, but I'm also a researcher by heart. I mean, that's what getting your PhD and focusing in on research and not trying to stand on your own thoughts and opinions, but supporting it with a lot of data and background and other research and other people's opinions. And so I did this deep dive. I'm not kidding you. I have 8 binders of AI content broken down by different service management processes, different service management concepts. And there's a gap to me from what actually service management is doing today with AI and what the hype cycle is. I think the word artificial is what is in most of these offerings today. It's not really intelligence. It's just more code and more programming. Right? We're going to take the common processes and procedures that you're doing today, and we're going to automate those. And it's not like, what we're doing is learning from that and then going, and then we can do this for you and this for you. It is really taking how we do things today and hard coding it into the system by putting those repeatable patterns in there. Now, that doesn't say that they can't deal with some exceptions and things like that, but we haven't gotten to that point where we have this true innovative artificial intelligence across the board. So it's up to us as practitioners to really get first of all, you need to understand the core concepts of what we're talking about with artificial intelligence. Educate yourself. Don't walk into a conversation with a vendor and go, well, I think I know what I'm talking about. I'm going to listen to the vendor, because the vendor is going to spin it the way that their tool actually does artificial intelligence. It's going to sound like it's the best thing since sliced bread. You have to understand the different primary concepts of what artificial intelligence is. What is machine learning, right? What do these platforms run on? educating yourself means that you'll go into choosing the right solution that will incrementally improve you. You're not going to completely wipe out 50% of your staff and automate everything overnight. You've got to pick an area where you have a lot of stuff already defined. You know it well, it's repeatable. You can take that, put that programming into the tool and get great return on investment in that narrow area. Think about something like, and I hesitate to do this because I have like 4 or 5 of these devices right here in the room with me. And depending on the name I pick, it probably is going to answer me. So we'll pick a fictitious name and we'll just call it, I don't know, basketball, right? So I say, hey, basketball, if I ask it something that it doesn't know, it immediately says to you, I don't know that yet. But I can guarantee you that the makers of those devices, when you say something that it doesn't know, if it happens at a frequent enough basis, they go out and figure out, okay, how can we build this core knowledge into the system? Like, just for example, if you ask, what's the weather today? Right? It's now connected where it can feed off of, let's say, weather.com and take your geographical position and say, okay, this is what that person wants to know. And it can give us that information. It appears to be intelligent, but it's just an interface that's accessing data and it understands the structure of that data, how to read it, and in real time, give us an answer. But that's essentially just coded. It's not like it's going, Julie asked me about something I don't know about. Can I figure out what she's asking me? We haven't quite made it to that point where it's thinking on its own. These devices are getting more and more and more powerful, but they still rely a lot on humans to understand what's being asked and whether or not it's an area that we want to begin exploring. I mean, but they're getting better. And the rapid pace of change that we've seen in just the last 5 years, I just cannot wait to see what happens in this space. So if I look at how that applies to service management, there's some low-hanging fruit for us almost immediately. Request fulfillment, incident management, self-serve, the chat bots where instead of sending a customer to a knowledge base and saying, search for something and then try to figure out which of these answers is the correct one, you ask a question and we point to the specific. It's like a smart front end to a query that takes you directly from your query to the exact piece of knowledge that you need. So that interface is incredibly helpful to our customers. But if we tried to do that across all of IT, the amount of knowledge and programming that we would have to put into that system to make it effective is massive. The amount of data and time that would take is incredible. But if we pick a narrow niche, like new employee hires, right? Say we get a lot of those, we got a lot of churn. We know what that process is going to be like. If you develop a bot for handling that HR process, it's going to be able to do it really well. You know all of the different possible paths you can go down, all the exceptions that could happen. So we need to kind of focus on using these technologies where we're going to get the greatest return on investment as we learn more about them and as they advance. Because the pace of change and the number of products out there in the market space, we're likely, if we make a major investment, that product's not going to be here next year. It's going to be bought by someone else, and we're going to be on the chain where we go from one vendor to another as they get bought out and other companies adopt their logic and their artificial intelligence engines. So that's my advice is this is a fantastic opportunity. And there's a lot of areas where we could apply this in service management, but we need to pick one that we understand well today so that we can help to embed our knowledge into that tool to make it more successful for the customers. And that's why there's all this hype around chat bots and using that as a customer interface, because it's one of the areas that is very repetitive. There's a lot of stuff documented, and it's an easy transition to take knowledge that we know about those repetitive things and put them into an interface for our customers. So it's a great low-hanging first, let's dive into artificial intelligence. But we do have to be careful. We want to change and we want to adapt, but we've got to learn. We've got to educate ourselves on what these tools can do, and let's make smart investments so that we're not putting our customers through a roller coaster ride.
Yeah, well said. One of the topics that's perhaps generating the most angst in IT is whether or not the bots are here to take IT jobs. What's the future of humans in IT? Call it in the next decade.
We had a very interesting panel conversation in the Bay Area last month, and all I can say is, I still writing an article from that, but it's focused on just this topic, which is, I thought it was interesting that we're hitting a point where there is some concern. It's not that these jobs, technologies will replace the jobs. Our people we're still going to need people at level 2, level 3, as level 1 becomes more automated. But the problem then becomes not, the number of staff that we have or how many people are we going to lose, it's their skill sets. So we should be thinking now, how can we advance level 1's skill set so that they can be successful in that new arena, where capturing knowledge, cleaning up knowledge, paying attention to transactions, improving these systems is a skill set that's inherent, right? That they understand how to do this to improve the technologies that we have today. But something that came up during that panel that I had not thought of, and it's one of the reasons why I'm writing this paper on the topic, is that what do we do? Where do our IT people go to learn those basic skills, right? We tend to use level 1 as this growing area, right? We bring people in, we can vet them out, make sure they're a good fit for the company, but they also learn about our products, our customers, our processes. And then for the people that are working well, we then bring them out of level 1, move them into level 2, and they become incredibly productive in the environment, and they never lose that focus on our customers and our products and our processes. It's been a well-established model for decades for growing the right people in the right positions. And if level 1 is automated, where do we build that foundation skill set? Where do we learn? We take people out of school, right? They have this book education. How do we fill that gap between, hey, I learned it in a book and now I have to apply this in the environment? So the problem becomes not, are we going to lose people? I mean, the more that we become ingrained in a technology society, the more advanced our skill sets are going to be and the more specific talent we're going to need in our talent pool. These tools don't run on their own yet. As far as I know, we don't have an AI device that maintains our AI device yet. So we still need people in that picture, but how do we make sure that the people that we've invested in now are going to continue down that skills path and develop the right skills? And how do we make sure that we have the ability to bridge that gap between, I just came out of school, I have no experience, but yet most of our jobs require more advanced skill sets. I think that has to be addressed at the university level, at the school level, where we spend more time learning more practical application, or maybe more allow people to specialize in certain areas where they're getting more internships and things where they're getting some practical experience before they enter the workforce. I mean, that's conceivable. But I also think we have to do better at that upfront education of our people when they come in to bridge that gap. So I thought that was a really interesting topic. It kind of spun it in a way that I did not expect it to go when I asked the question of the panel about what skill sets do you think we're going to need. But I think that the insights that I saw there that were the best were the people that said, look, we were thinking about this 10 years ago, and we started transitioning our staff into new types of skill sets then so that they were prepared for now. And I thought, wow, this should have been a topic we talked about, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, about changing our requirements around skill sets and getting people geared up and ready for this. It's not like we didn't see it coming.
So, gosh, time flies when you're having fun. I've got to get in this one last question, and then maybe we'll have you back on another episode to continue. So you and I both have kids. Mine are a little younger than yours. So let's say I go home tonight and I'm having a conversation with them about what skills to be investing in to be leaders in their fields, whatever fields they choose in, call it 2030. How do I have that conversation? What am I, as a proud parent, wish the best for them? What are the areas where I think they should be investing in their personal development are not good candidates for automation?
I am a firm believer in experimentation. I think far too quickly we start talking about, planning for the future for our kids and not giving them, I think they need to develop those innovative and passionate feelings about work. And that to me comes from exploration and scientific experimentation. And I know this because when my kids were in this talented and gifted program and everything else, and they come home from school one day and my son was just like wickedly excited about something, and they had given him a microscope and they were doing stuff. He was like in second or third grade. All the other kids didn't get that opportunity, but he did. And you could see how in his little world had just expanded that day. That things were not what they were the day earlier in the day before he got his hand on that microscope. And so I think, from an IT perspective, knowing how much innovation plays and how much thinking about things in a different way, not being myopic. This is the way that we've always done it. This is the way it says we should do it. That innovative, creative, passionate is something that we absolutely have to build in our next generation. But if it were me and I was going into school today, I would not do anything that didn't have data analysis and mathematics. I know these are not topics that are of a great interest, but we're doing so much with our abilities to analyze data, and it's not a skill set that a lot of people are good at. And I think, if I were going into IT, it's one area that I would make sure that I have some exposure to, simply because I need to be able to use the knowledge, analyze the knowledge that we're capturing, and look at things that are data-driven, as well as, coming up with creative ways. The two go hand in hand to me.
So many more topics that I'm itching to jump into. Press pause there. Hopefully you'll be willing to come back and have the second part of this conversation another time. Before we wrap, I'll give a quick plug for the certification courses that we're going to be presenting, teaching the concepts of AI and machine learning to IT leaders. Really excited about the first one that we have coming up. We'll make sure to provide a link in the show notes to register for those upcoming courses. But most important, Julie, so nice having you on the show. Really enjoyed the discussion, and please take us up on the offer to come back soon, would you?
I'd love to, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Good. Great work. Thanks to everyone for listening. This concludes another episode of AI and the Future of Work. Thanks again to guest host Julie Mohr.
To learn about AI certification courses with Dan Turchin and Julie Mohr, visit the Astound website, www.astound.ai, for more information.